what you all think. I want to know what you all think. Are the police trying to purge black people? Hit like button, make sure you share the stream, make sure you let everybody know that I'm running the stream. I want to know what you guys think, because personally, I think that the police are trying their best to. Because in my opinion, when I look at what's happening across the country, and when I look at some of the things that's been happening to black folks, back to back to back to back to back, I have to ask the question, are police trying to purge black people? You know, we've seen across the planet how there's these conspicuous disappearances of black people, and how the police never seem to investigate, but it's definitely pronounced here in America. Here in America, you have people who justify what happens to black people all the time. Here in America, you have people who will dissipate the energy when it comes to certain social justice movements. And this seems like random statements, but it's all going to make sense in quite a second. Now, that being said, what am I talking about? I'm talking about there was a case in Tennessee, in Memphis, by the Memphis Police Department, where they assaulted a young black man. His name was Tyree Nichols. Tyree Nichols, he allegedly was engaging in reckless driving. We don't know that to be true. He was only accused of that. We can't ask him anymore because he's no longer with us. Apparently, he was taken to the hospital because he ran for the police, allegedly. Allegedly. That's what's alleged to happen, because we don't have footage, because the police have refused to release it. And, well, then we have so far is that Tyree Nichols, he passed away at the hospital. He had kidney damage. He had heart damage. He had all kinds of damage. Do you understand how much you got to hit a man and beat a man to make that happen? There's footage now? Good. I haven't seen that yet. I'm going to take a look at it. When I take a look at it, I'm going to do some content on that, because that situation has me really, really, really upset. Let's just say that. But I say that so far into 2023, we've seen so many police shootings. So far into 2023, we've seen so many police misconduct settlements. So far into 2023, we have so many stories where the police have arrested or even assaulted black people, or arrested them for just doing simple stuff. Do a FOIA request. Yes, I've already called them. I haven't sent off the email yet, because I've been trying to get up on the case and try to learn as much as I can without having to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and do that now. That's one of the first things I probably should have done. But honestly, I just learned about this case recently. So, I mean, I really haven't gotten a chance to really sit down and dig into it the way I want to dig into it. But are the police trying to purge black people? I think so. That's what their purpose was from the beginning. You can't sit here and tell me that black people, the 6th leading cause of black men leaving the earth being the police, and then tell me that this is not a targeted effort. It absolutely is. Be it that the police understand the actual stats when it comes to someone being locked up. They understand the negative life outcomes that happens as a result of that. So these police officers, instead of using their discretion, they will lock somebody up for a completely victimless crime, usually a black person, and then subject them to a life of just living behind the curve. They're overseers, exactly. They are overseers. They are overseers by a different name. This is why when people say things like, well, the police chief or the sheriff is black, it doesn't really make sense, because when you think about it, even overseers back during the slavery days, there were some who were actually light-skinned. Some who were black, actually. Some of them who were under the conditions of white supremacy, and they were told, hey, watch over these people, and if any of them go missing, we're going to get you. So, exactly, you are essentially forced to be what you are. Or in the case of a black police officer, you understand that if you want to keep your job, you better not ever say nothing. And if you do, guess what? All the people that you're going to tell on, they all have firearms. And they can make somebody disappear. There's been a lot of police officers who have disappeared under some very suspicious circumstances. Like, you remember the recent case with the LAPD? One guy, he passes away during a training exercise, and now his family is asking what actually happened, and coming to find out, he's the same officer who's a whistleblower, and it just so happens that he happens to disappear. Not disappear, but he's the one who gets ghosted. Fascinating, huh? See, and that shows you. If they'll do that to their own coworkers, what do you think that they've been doing to black people this whole time? How many black people have gone missing? Do you know that most police gangs across the country, their whole initiation is taking somebody out. Do you want to know what probably happens to a lot of those missing black people who you can't find? A lot of the homeless who you can't find suddenly? When their families finally when their families get around to finally looking for them and they can't find them? All these missing black folks? And you find them later on in the freaking river? Or behind a corner? Or in a dumpster somewhere? See, that's what I'm talking about. When I say purge, I don't mean a direct takeover. It happens slowly. It happens slowly. This purge is an infection, and it spreads over time. See, when I say that, right, a lot of people are going to be confused. Let me explain to you, right? Let me explain to you the reasons why I say it's going to be more covert and more silent than direct. Because it is much easier to have black men have the sixth leading cause of us leaving the earth being the police. It's much easier to lock us up for nonviolent crimes and then justify it when you have to chase us and then we run because we're scared of the police. We've been scared for generations. It is in our epigenetics to run from the police because they're slave catchers. That's what they are. That's what police have always been. So when you see black men running from the police because of a nonviolent crime and then the police just take them out because of that, like Walter Scott, prime example. North Charleston. A lot of people have forgotten that case. This man's only crime, right? This man's only crime was missing a child support payment. That's it. That's it. That was the only crime. It's the only thing he had ever done wrong. And stuff like that demonstrates why Karens call the police on us, because they understand what the police do, right? See, the police, Walter Scott was a veteran. I believe he was with the Navy, I believe. His daughter, man, that was a horrible case. But, you know, the reason why Karens call the police on us, because they understand that the police, their job is to purge us. Otherwise, you remember the Central Park Karen? The lady who was going to call the police because a guy was, a black man was bird watching. And she had her dog, and her dog wasn't on a leash. And so she called the police on him, saying that, oh, is this guy's going to do all this stuff to me and everything else? And she was lying. Do you understand the reason why she did that? Do you understand the psychology and the reason why she did that? She did that because she understands what the police do to black men usually. She was weaponizing the police. And the fact that we even have Karen memes to begin with, the original Karens, the reason why we even have those memes is because of the fact that I'm actually right. Because we understand how some people see the police. So I'm not wrong when I say that the police are here to purge us, because Karens use them as if that's their purpose. So if so many of them have been exposed as racist and a part of far-right groups and extremist groups, in fact, the LAPD at this point, the LAPD's chief just announced they will no longer be using the thin blue line flag. They have banned the thin blue line flag because the LAPD's chief even said it represents racists. That the far right have co-opted it. That it no longer represents what many law enforcement officers actually think it does. And given the size of the LAPD, I mean, that is significant. That's significant, right? But you can't tell Blue Lives Matter that. So if you understand that they've been using this symbol this whole time, and yet you understand that you have police gangs in California, you have deputy gangs all over California, same LAPD, especially in the LA Sheriff's Department. You know, you got deputy gangs all over the place who are racist, who don't like black people, and yet they've been using the flag that you now completely concede has been co-opted by the far right. What that immediately means is everybody who's using that flag, according to the LAPD, is a far right extremist. There's a chance of it, right? Now, do you see what I mean? See, it comes down to a pattern. See? I'm going to take a spin off of what the famous man once said. It's not the money, it's the culture. See? That statement it's not the money, it's the culture. That can be applied in several different ways. See, yeah, that can be applied to black empowerment. That can be applied to why black empowerment hasn't come along as far as it has. It can be used to explain other cultures and how they've done well. But it can also explain police corruption. People think that throwing money at the police over and over and over again is going to fix the problem. It's not the money, it's the culture. The culture of policing. The culture of policing is purging black people. Remember, it's not the money, it's a culture. Kudos to anybody who knows who came up with that quote. I'm going to give y'all a little bit of time to come up with that and see and figure it out for yourself. But the thing is that police for the longest time have not only engaged in purge-like activities against police, against black people, but on top of that, they've allowed it. They've sat by and watched it. Prime example: Rosewood in Florida, right? Levy County, Florida. There was a situation. It was made into a movie. It was starring Don Cheadle, Ving Rhames, and John Voight, who's I believe he's Angelina Jolie's dad. And the situation was that it was an escaped person out of a prison. I want to say, named Jesse Hunter. And a white woman claimed that Jesse Hunter had did something horrible to her. There was never any proof of that. Never any proof. Never. She just claimed it. She just claimed it. A bunch of mobs started going towards black towns, particularly Rosewood, and they burned it down. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people are gone. And it was the first time in American history that a U.S. state paid money towards racial violence. That happened in Florida. See, so what happened in that case is that woman back then weaponized white rage against black people. Because for all we know, she could have simply been engaging in infidelity, and we simply don't know. We don't know. It is just like Bill Burr. Bill Burr is a white comedian, but he said something that was absolutely real. He was on, I believe he was featured on Saturday Night Live, and he gave a whole monologue, a whole bit about white women. He said, "Hey, white women, you're sitting here blaming all white men when back in the day when you wanted to go hook up with a black guy, you would do so, and if you were caught, you would say that you didn't consent to it, and then the black guy would be harmed for it." So usually what those white women would do back then, they would go to the cops. So you had Karens even back then who weaponized the police against us because they knew what the police were meant for. The police were always meant to purge black people in this country. There's no debate about that. Listen, let me give you a prime example, right? Throughout history, there's been massacres. It happens a lot to black people. Like, I'll give you one that you might not even heard of, right? In Orangeburg, South Carolina, there was something called the Orangeburg Massacre. There was some black people there who wanted to go and skate and bowl, right, at a bowling alley, and it was a whites only, right? And apparently, they just got mowed out. That's what happened. That was the Orangeburg Massacre. And to commemorate that event, I believe that's at South Carolina State University. They have a celebratory bowling alley that they have. See, there's a lot of massacres that's happened to black people throughout history that many of you aren't even aware of. A lot of lives lost because the police and white society, they were always trying to get rid of us. They can't work us, get rid of you. It don't matter if you ain't committed crime. Breonna Taylor certainly didn't. It didn't matter if you were just innocent. A lot of people were innocent. It didn't matter. See, when you are seen as the permanent underclass by police, they will do anything they can to prove to you that you're a permanent underclass. Like, for example, if you got to meet your quota at the end of the month, it is much easier to go to a black neighborhood and pull over people falsely than it is to go to a white one where everyone has lawyers to afford. At the end of the month, when you got to meet your quota, and let's say that you want to make that promotion, and you need a big case, it's much easier to go to the evidence room and pick up a bunch of substances and plant it on a black person than it is to plant it on somebody named Billy. You know, somebody named Billy Joe. Much easier. It's much easier to plant things on someone named Jamal than someone named Skylar or Becky. Let's just keep it above. And let's say during that exchange of you being arrested, of you being of having something planted on you, right? You happen to run from the police because of the epigenetics that are that's in your blood. Whereas we all black people are afraid of the police because that's what their purpose was. Their purpose. You understand that part of the police uniform over time, it was to exert authority. And if your original purpose was to be slave catchers, and you're trying to get a uniform to exert authority, well, it comes at no surprise when the people who you use that authority on for so long are afraid of you. You got people here who are so oblivious. And I know I got off on a different tangent, but I gotta say this. You got people here who are so oblivious, right? You'll understand the reason why when you throw down a cucumber, a cat will jump. You get that, right? Even though it's a cucumber. So what do you think happens when for generations, you've had the police targeting people who look just like me? That badge, that same badge. What do you think happens? You make excuses for a cat, but not black people, not your fellow human beings. Like, if you understand there are conflicts that are raging on that happen because of a shorter duration of time as slavery. And people still, if you bring up those conflicts, there will be a conflict right there. You understand that's happening across the planet right now, right? You understand that? In every country, there's another country that country doesn't like. It's just a thing. All right? You go over to the freaking UK, you see the same thing. You go over to the African continent, you see tribes versus tribes. Right? Happens all the time. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. Right? You see that all the time. All over the world. Yeah, people are confused about this. It's amazing to me. How is it that you can make excuses for a dog or a cat? Or you understand that people have centuries of conflict that wasn't even 400 years or 500 years long. And they have strong feelings. They have violent feelings about that. Seriously. And yet you want us to just get over it. When the get over it period was the early period after slavery into the civil rights era into now. What period was the get over was the get over it period? What duration of time has black people had enough relief collectively from the police, from police violence, from racist police violence that we still are dealing with to this very day, that I cover every day? What respite has black people have from the police? Because hold on, if you say things have gotten better, give me the decade span. Right? Give me the decade span. Like, go from the 80s to the 90s or the 70s to the 80s. Give me the decade span. If cops are so good, you should be able to give me a decade within the past 200 years, right? I'm giving you 200 years. That is quite a sample size. Give me 10 years. 10. You can't. And you know you can't. You want to know why? Because I've mastered the power called Google, and I'll prove you wrong every time. See, it goes back to Jacob and Esau. Yeah, right. It definitely goes. But I want you to understand something, right? Whenever you have a colonizing force, they need a contingency plan. They need an occupying force to keep a people who are essentially refugees, victims, to keep them in check. That's the role of U.S. law enforcement. That's all they do. Because I know that because of the result of Town of Castle Rock v. Gonzalez and DeShaney v. Winnebago from those Supreme Court cases, I know for a fact cops have no constitutional duty don't have no constitutional duty to protect you. So if they don't protect you, what is it that they actually do? Well, since they don't actually protect you, we got to go back to what is your purpose? We got to go back in history. What was the purpose of U.S. law enforcement? You know what I'm going to do for you? I have my desktop right here. I'm going to look it up for you. I want you to see what the U.S. Marshals used to do to black people. I want you to see, right? This is from the U.S. Marshals website. I want you to see this because this is going to blow your mind. Right? This is from the U.S. Marshals website. Right? And I want you to see this, right? That is their actual web address. I want you to see this. They're admitting that they at one point were slave catchers. The constitutional imperative enforcing the fugitive slave law put marshals squarely in the middle of the controversy. Abolitionists and their opponents of slavery and fugitive slave law willfully and as a matter of conscience violated the law by rescuing fugitive slaves from custody of U.S. Marshals. The free slaves were taken to Canada. Northern hatred of slavery and Southern protection of their peculiar institution resulted in Southern secession from the Union and National Civil War. So basically, people were getting them out of the hands of the U.S. Marshals. The U.S. Marshals were catching runaway slaves, and people were helping them and getting them to Canada out of the hands of the U.S. Marshals. They enforced the slave codes. That was the purpose of U.S. law enforcement. They enforced the slave code. See, I know this information off the top of my head. I've done whole research of this. I've written paper after paper. Some of the stuff that I've done is cited in papers. Because it's very difficult to find somebody who knows this stuff off the top of my head the way that I know it. It's very difficult. I'm like a walking encyclopedia of police misconduct. There's no state you're gonna just shout out and says, "Oh, I have great cops here." I can tear down cops by state, from memory, from the dome. No script needed. So with that being said, listen, cops were always meant to purge black people. You saw that from the U.S. Marshal webpage. The U.S. Marshals, those are federal. That was the federal government. The federal government enforced slave codes. The U.S. Marshals enforce slave codes, and now you want to ask me why do black descendants of American slaves or foundational black Americans deserve reparations? I just showed you why. Let me show you again. I want you to see this again for all the white people who don't want us to get reparations. The federal government sent U.S. Marshals after us. When we would escape slave plantations, they would send the U.S. Marshals after us. Wow. Wow. That's why black descendants of American slaves or foundational black Americans, that's why we need our reparations. That's why. That's why. Because the federal government sent race soldiers after us. U.S. law enforcement was always meant to purge black people. What happened to Tyree Nichols, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, so many others. I mean, it's not surprising to us. You know, white America was so shocked when they saw the footage of Rodney King and George Floyd. Many in black America could only cry. And the tears, was it from sadness? Well, it was from sadness, but it wasn't from the sadness of us seeing what we were seeing. It was the sadness that this has been continued after all these years. That was the sadness that we felt with George Floyd. Many white people didn't understand some of the cries that he was making when he was calling for his mother. A black man gets it. A black man gets it. I mean, anybody of any color could get it, but we really got it. You know, you see a police officer putting his hands on a black woman's hair. See, a white person wouldn't get the reason why that's a major violation. A black person would get it. A black person would get it. You know, they disrespect us. They treat us like we don't matter. And I think that it comes time that we got to retaliate on the streets. And I ain't talking about marching. That's all, folks.